Up to now, we've only used an application by itself. Module 6, we're going to look at how we add services to an application. So when we look at the catalogue, you'll see there are quite a number of services within Bluemix. And if you're on the command line, you can also see that catalogue using the cf marketplace command. And that allows you to see what services are available. For an application to use a service, it first needs to bind to a service. So I can do that from the user interface, or I can do it from the command line with the bind service, the BS command. Once I've attached a service to an application, I then need to work out how the application can talk to that service. And the way that Bluemix achieves this is by setting an environment variable called VCAP services. That environment variable will hold a JSON document. So to understand what services are bound to my application and get things like the credentials to access that service, I need to parse out the JSON that's in that VCAP services environment variable. From the Bluemix user interface, you can actually see the content of that environment variable by opening up an application and then switching to the environment variables tab as shown on the slide. Parsing out the environment variable in most languages is fairly simple. JSON is becoming the common format for REST APIs, so most languages will have a way or a library to parse out a JSON string. I put some samples on the slides here. Again, no error checking to make it simple, but you'll see that it's quite easy to parse out that JSON document. And what you're usually looking for is the credential section, because that's where you will get the information of how I access the service, what host it's on, what port it's on, any user ID and password. One thing to note, if you're using a Java runtime, then there are some capabilities built into the Java runtime, the Liberty runtime, that will automatically configure your Java application server to add the configuration needed for certain services. And you can get that information from the documentation on the Java Liberty build pack. One important thing to remember though is when you're using services, you need to be able to test your code, and you don't want unit tests to actually go outside of Bluemix and test the functionality of the service. So you can think of the public API as a contract. As a consumer, you are going to write code to that contract, that API contract. And when you unit test, what you need to do is just test your code is sticking to that contract. So I don't care about whether the call works or not. I'm just checking that I use the API. I stick to the contract. And there are test frameworks that provide capabilities. They're often called mocks or stubs, and sometimes called test doubles, where I'm actually going to prevent the call to the external service, but I'm going to verify that I'm actually using the API correctly. And you need to adopt those frameworks within your unit tests.